Now we have to remove the cylinder heads. We have to remove the coil packs. First, get all the electrical connectors away from there. Pull this middle tab up, and then pull that connector out. Unplug each coil from the spark plug wire. Now remove these 5 studs. Hold the coil pack assembly on with a 10mm socket. And then just pull the assembly off. Disconnect this coolant temperature sensor. And then pull the spark plug wire off each spark plug. Now remove each spark plug, otherwise they like to get caught on the exhaust manifold on the way out. Use a 5/8 spark plug socket. Take some PB Blaster and spray it on each one of the exhaust manifold bolts. And the back's kind of hard to see. Just let them soak. And let that sit for a while. Exhaust bolts love to break when you try to pull them out dry. Now do the same thing for the passenger side head. Remove the coil pack assemblies. Pull the spark plug wires, pull the spark plugs, and hit the exhaust manifold bolts with PB Blaster. First get these heater hoses out of the way best you can. Pull that connector for the coil pack assemblies. And get rid of that connector there. And you should be able to pull this harness away. It's falling apart. Take a 10mm and remove this heater hose support bracket. And pull this wiring harness support flip. Now I can get rid of this wiring harness. Get it away from coil packs. Remove the alternator charging lead out of the way. Now you can remove the studs that hold on the coil pack assembly. The back stud is hard to get to, so either use a box end wrench or a swivel socket. It's the hardest thing to get to. that. Slide a catch container under the vehicle, passenger side, and I have to drain the coolant and then just disconnect the radiator hose from the engine side. Pair of vice grips. Squeeze that spring metal hose clamp. Just grab hold of the hose and twist it off. Be sure to open the radiator cap to allow the cooling system to vent, and then just let it drain. Just don't worry about getting it on the AC compressor. You can just always clean it off with some brake cleaner. Speed up the process, you can disconnect one of the heater core hoses, because the coolant will slowly dribble out of the lower radiator hose connector because the engine has the thermostat in there and it restricts the flow. So to speed things up, disconnect the heater core hose. Take a can of brake cleaner, use it to clean off the AC compressor and everything. Now take a 15mm and remove the bolt that holds the dipstick onto the head. Get rid of the spark plug wires. The back one is especially difficult to reach, so I use these ridiculously long needle nose pliers. Now get rid of the spark plugs. Again, the back one is tricky because you have this shield underneath the AC accumulator. Now you can begin removing the exhaust manifold bolts. 13mm. Snatch the gasket out of here. Same thing for the passenger side. Now on the passenger side, don't do the rearmost exhaust bolt last. Do it second last because that bolt's hard enough to get out. So I always leave the second to last bolt in before I take this in. This bolt is hard enough to get out without the exhaust manifold trying to push your wrench away. It's also helpful to remove the heat shield. It's held in with these 4 10mm bolts, and the 5th one down by the flange. You can see that. And finally a 6th one right here in between these two at the lower portion of the manifold. Oh, there you go. I can snatch the heat shield out. With the heat shield removed, it makes getting at that back bolt slightly easier. Now you can get rid of the final bolt. There we go. I just kind of shove the exhaust manifolds away from the head bolts. You're gonna need to turn those. Snatch the gasket out. Get rid of it. Remove this coolant hose. It's held in with this spring metal hose clamp. And yeah, they're usually stuck on there. Just rotate it, pull it off. Now remove this coolant crossover tube. It's held in with 2 10mm bolts, one on each head. And then just pull it off. Now remove these 3 15mm bolts that hold this alternator bracket to the head. You don't have to completely remove the bracket, just the bolts. Now remove this lower 15mm bolt down here. And then remove this side 15mm bolt. Just give it some support. There you go. Now you can just, this bracket will fall away from the head. Get rid of this 10mm bolt that holds this wiring harness bracket on. And then you can further get that away from the head. Now remove the valve covers, 8mm. And these bolts stay with the valve cover. I'll take a pry tool and just separate it. Same thing for the passenger side. If they come out attached to their bushing, then they will pull out of the valve cover. So, detach it and just stuff it back in there. Snatch it out of there. Now you have to start removing the rockers, and it's very important that the rockers go back onto where they were. They don't get mixed up, because that can cause excessive wear on the valve stem and the push rod end, and probably other places. So when you remove the rocker, mark it. I mark it with tape. Just wrap some tape around it. Left side, I just do L1, L2, L3, L4, etc. And then do that for the push rods. And on the push rods, just mark which end is the top, because obviously the bottom's going to be different with new lifters. Use an 8mm socket. Use a larger ratchet, because these things are surprisingly tight. I just thread the bolts back in. Take a little bit of brake cleaner and spray it on a paper towel or a shop rag or something. Just use it to wipe the rockers off. Get some of the oil off so the tape will stick to it. I just take some masking tape or something, wrap it around. And take a Sharpie and just write L1 for left side of the engine first rocker. And just do that for each of the rockers. Now grab the push rod, pull it out of there. I just clean up the top, get the oil off. Put the tape on the top to indicate that it is the top, because that way we don't put it in upside down. Just make a little flag. That's right. L1. And just do that for all the push rods. Okay, now remove the rocker post. Comes out as one assembly. Mark which side is front and left, obviously. So I just spray it off with a little bit of brake cleaner. I just put the tape on the front part and then just mark it left. Now do the exact same thing for the passenger side.